And I'm bringing my good friend Mike Gerson on the show today. Mike, how are you?
I am amazing. Life, there's just tons of miracles every single day, every single second of every day, and life is good.
I
Yeah, how are
love
you
that.
doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for asking. Before we get into all the amazing concepts that you teach, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you grew up and how you grew up?
Yeah. So I grew up in the Bay Area, Alameda, Oakland, San Francisco, Berkeley area. And I always consider myself the last of the Sandlot kids, where basically, starting at 8 o'clock, your parents pushed you out the door. The park was right across the street. I didn't even want to come home. So I just packed brown bagged it, went to the park, played soccer, basketball, tennis, tetherball, just kind of bebopped around the neighborhood and played free. And I mean, it was exceptional. I mean, that was my career. That's what I did on the daily basis. And I'd clock in early, clock in, around 6 o'clock when mom called me for dinner. Dream about playing sports and wake up and do it all over again. And I was very fortunate. My father was my coach, so I grew up with sports psychologist, untrained sports psychologist in the
Ah,
household because he was just I mean, he just had all the quotes, all the quips, all the analogies, all the illustrations and examples, leadership and mental toughness and focus and everything. He was just like a walking quote, and so he was like my first sports psychologist, like baptized me in the fire of mental toughness, and then from there, I was just really fortunate to have some male coaches, especially in the area of baseball, high school and college and beyond, that had a penchant for the mental game. So, very lucky that I had some mentors who, believed in the mental side of sports, that was a pathway to making improvements and upping your game and playing consistently. And that really rubbed off on me. So grew up in the Bay. I'm back in the Bay. I was gone for a long time, but this is home, and now I have a son playing sports, and that's a lot of fun.
that's a beautiful thing. Yeah, when I came out to Miami a couple years ago, or specifically last year when KJ and Maceo came to stay out with me, we were very blessed where they had like a basketball, or I'm still at the same place, but they have a outdoor basketball court in a park, which they were able to do that very much, where they're just
Mhm.
see you in a few hours.
Yeah,
Um, so God bless that that's still available in some
yeah,
ways.
yeah. It's a little different nowadays, as you know, but
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just it's not the norm, right?
no,
It's in
not at
terms
all.
of just the way things are set up. It's just definitely not the norm. And then, so you say that your dad played a big role in terms of you leading into what you do now?
Oh yeah, man. The Pops was my hero growing up. Like he was. I remember. So we were 40-1 from
Mhm.
fourth grade to eighth grade, and we were beating teams. Like we were scoring chase like 60, 70 points as fourth graders. Just it with no three pointers. We're
Mhm.
just straight balling, and so we dominated. And he was an old school coach, and I remember him and my mom taking me to go see Hoosiers, and it's like every sports movie has like a training training clips,
Yeah.
and so busting out the chairs and dribbling around the chairs, blowing the whistle and moving left and getting low and moving right. And I looked over to Pops. I was like, damn, that's everything he does. Like this movie must be about him. So, uh, yeah, he was a huge impact influence in many ways too, just not only in sports, but the guy really is like a yogi in ways, a
Mm.
karma practitioner as far as like just he loves everybody and he gives so much, and he's a philanthropist and he's altruistic, and he's a funny dude too, good writer. He's got a lot of skills. So yeah, I was super blessed to have him and mom, and just a lot of people around, good support system.
And then with your background in psychology, that mindset of giving and being altruistic, do you feel like that's a personality trait, or do you feel like that's something that's developed, or both?
Yeah. So it's both. So what they're finding nowadays, like if you take out, if you purchase like a basic introduction to sports psychology, and then it's divided in all these different chapters, attention control and motivation and confidence and imagery and athletic injury and burnout and, substance, all that stuff, right? You'll find the most research really looks at trait and state. So trait is like your predisposition, your genetic, uh, you know, um, predisposition towards stuff, versus state, which is, like, let me give you an example. Like if you have trait like gratitude, it's pretty much fixed. So you can be in certain situations, and you're grateful, like for the suffering and the hardship. Like you have the ability to say, you know what, like I need a little bit of that in life. Suffering is grace, or suffering brings me closer to the divine, or God, or suffering. There's a lesson there if I'm looking hard enough for it. And so it really protects you against a lot of life slings and arrows. But it's also a mood, as well. So, and then also a state or an emotion, gratitude would be. So things are looked at as, predisposition to stuff, and then also state. But the thing is with the brain is they now know that it's an open system, right? That you can make changes, you can unfreeze, the trait like things that maybe you want to change, like maybe you are overreactionary. That's just part of your DNA and who you are. You can rewire the brain through what you pay attention to you and how you educate yourself and what you train on and focus and what you develop.
That's amazing. And then in your work with the military and in professional baseball, I haven't seen very much emphasis on finding out what people's traits are and then adapting based on that. Did you have any experience with that, or do you feel like it's evolving towards that at all?
So I think it depends on your level in the military. So I worked with special forces operators, and they took a lot of assessments and had to take a lot of paper and pencil tests to determine their values, or their like there's one, the test of attention on interpersonal style, like the way in which you kind of handle things and deal with things. Are you someone who's instinctive and reactionary versus someone who is disciplined and analytical, and logical, sequential? How do you make decisions? If you were in a stressful situation, what approach would you most likely, trigger or use? So yeah, they do it in certain populations, for sure. And then in sports now, like there's a Troutwine athletic profile that looks at a lot of your trait like mental toughness traits. They have like
Said trout wine?
yeah, Troutwine athletic profile.
Trout wine.
Yeah, the TAP,
Okay.
called.
Tap.
Yes,
Okay.
they used the TAP. Like the way it got famous was they used it for, remember Ryan Leaf and
Yes.
Peyton Manning, and
Yeah.
that's what kind of got famous, was
Okay.
that Dr. Troutwine used the TAP with both those dudes, and then found out that Peyton Manning had just was more equipped to deal with high stress, rugged situations, better decision maker, leader, whatever. And then since then, they've just been continuing to evolve. Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. And then, so how did you end up with working with special forces?
It was fortuitous. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. My direction was always, going to be steered towards working in Major League Baseball. I mean, even at a young age, I wanted to play and be a professional athlete. But hell, man, I didn't care if I was selling peanuts or scrubbing the urinals. I mean, I was going to find a way to get to working for the major leagues. And then when I got out of school, I was doing some teaching for like one quarter at a junior college, just kind of waiting for something to come along. And my old professor, who works at James Madison University, he's now the president of the Association for Applied Sports Psychology. He sent me a link to an application for the military. I was like, oh man, that might be kind of cool. And interviewed, landed it. And my friend and colleague at the time, Peter Lee, we always fight over who was the first one hired for the Army Center for Enhanced Performance. That was 2006. And now the Army is the biggest employer of mental performance coaches in the world. So there's hundreds of them now. And Peter Lee and I were the first two that got to really develop the program. So
That's amazing. And then why do you feel that the Army has found that so beneficial, where it went from 0 to 2 to hundreds?
yeah, I think one, because Dr. Louis Choka, who created the Center for Enhanced Performance up at West Point, like in the 1980s, he was just brilliant. I like consider him the father of military mental skills or performance psychology, and he had such a huge impact, with West Point cadets using, focusing on three prongs. One was the military performance component, another an academic, and the third one a sport. And he was doing some groundbreaking things where he was adding in bioneurofeedback. He had a kinesthetic lab. He had the curriculum. He had the charisma. He was in Vietnam, and there's some crazy stories there, like what kind of leader he was, and how he led men, towards the bullets. So he's a fascinating guy. And from there, he established the first Army Center for Enhanced Performance at Fort Bragg in North Carolina in Fayetteville. And just really took off because, whether performance is performance is performance, it doesn't matter what you're doing. That the soldier is a tactical athlete. The difference between regular athlete in sports and then tactical athletes is your ass is on the line. Like if you make the wrong decision or the wrong move, or you're not focused, or you're not communicating or shooting, moving, talking, then the end result could be a loss of life. So a lot of pressure situations, when it comes to the military, whether it's shooting, jumping out of planes, combat, academics, learning a new language for the special forces operators, just on and on and on.
That's amazing. And based on what you're saying in terms of just the consequences of not having attention in that environment, I would love to pivot toward talking a little bit about attention control. We live in a world that's a digital distraction. Could you tell a little bit just about what attention control is and why you think that's valuable?
Yeah, I think it's there's always this debate, like if you were to choose or identify the most important skill, what would it be? And there's no real answer. Like they're all important. It depends on, the person's situation, your traits, how you generally perform. But as I've been in this field almost 20 years now, and the more and more I'm in here, the more I'm convinced that attention is the most important skill that we can teach anybody, especially in this sea of noise that we live in today. I think when we're working with athletes, one thing that I try to do is like try to find the generational problems and issues that athletes are dealing and contending with. Not only generation, but just like what's happening in the environment, the culture, the society. And one of the things is that people's attention is just split constantly. How can you then walk that over to performance? Like how can you perform if you're multitasking? You really can't. In fact, like peak performance and flow is all about being 100% engaged in what you're doing and the task at hand. Right? That's like part of the definition of the zone or flow. And so what are some of the skills that you can teach? Attention control. So there's a famous guy, William James, who's like a great American psychologist, and he said the education of attention would be the education par excellence. And I agree with him. Without the ability to focus, and you don't have a steady mind. You can't stay in the present moment. If you're not steady and you're not present, you can't really listen and absorb the information. If you don't absorb the information, you can't translate that information. It just doesn't stick, right? You can't repeat proper techniques. You can't replicate correct form. You don't have the correct movements or the strategies. And so without it, you're no good, not no good as a person, but you're going to be very, very average, right? There's a guy that works with Olympic athletes. His name is Peter Haber, and he says attention is the currency of performance.
Mm.
I agree. Like, it's true that you have to develop, or we need to develop, cultivate, and mine attention. It's to me like a raw material, for performance excellence. So then, like, how do you do that? Well, there's tons of attentional control tactics that athletes and tactical athletes, or just performers in general. I mean, it could be a medic, a nurse, a stay-at-home mom, a stay-at-home dad. It doesn't really matter. We can all work and hone and spit shine our attention, and that's going to help us, because without it, we're just all over the place. We're scattered, can't pay attention, we can't listen, relationships suffer, performance declines. And so attention, also, like, the definition to me is, attention is kind of like a giant highlighter. It makes, like, parts of the world pop out and others recede. And so, what you're trying to do is, in sports, is like, know what's important now. You probably know, like, the WIN acronym, what's important now. Getting yourself there mentally, staying there if it calls for it, knowing how to get back there when you're distracted. And then it's also about shifting your focus on the right thing at the right place at the right time. And so, how do you do that? People do it a lot of different ways. Meditation is a great way of honing your focus, sitting down, closing your eyes, quieting the mind, creating an environment of stillness, focusing on your breath. Can you focus on your breath 10 times without being distracted? I teach mindfulness for like almost 10 years now and develop curriculum. And it's fun to watch students get to like 2 or 3, and some people can't even sit down. They sit down, they freak out. They get up and it's just like, I got too much shit to do. I can't be sitting down. I'm wasting time. But without the ability to still the mind, then once again, you are overrun by distractions. Your attention's pulled into the past. You're jumping to the future. You're paying attention to the scouts in the stands. You're paying attention to mom and dad rooting you on. You're thinking about, what does this all mean? And by the way, strike 3 on the outside corner at 92 miles an hour. Like, you have to be 100% present. If you want to be 100% present, train focus. And there's,
that's just where I was going to go with that, is that, so let's say you provide, someone comes to you and says, hey, I'm having a hard time focusing. You give them the 10 breath exercise, they get to like 2, they can improve that, right? Through reps.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh yeah. It's definitely trainable. It's a skill, like anything else. And the cool thing is like, people have been meditating for thousands of years, and it really, to me, is a science. If it's repeatable and everybody's having the same experience, which is, hey, shit, when I sit down, like, man, I feel more spaciousness. I feel calmer. I'm able to respond instead of react. I'm like hanging around my family, and I don't want to rip anybody's head off, or they're not annoying me as much, or my stress tolerance is increasing, or dealing with my kid, and I'm just not having a knee-jerk reaction, but really thinking about letting things go. Like, tremendous, right? And then from there, once your concentration is like online, then you could really start to investigate all of your issues and problems and meaning of life. Like, it equips you with the ability to create a lot of insight. And for me, like, one of the things I try to teach athletes and help them with is developing a performance mindset. And a part of developing a performance mindset is like building your awareness. Because, there's a lot of athletes out there that are they're on automatic pilot. Like, you ask them, how did you do today? What went well? And they're just like, I don't know. They perform poorly. You say, well, what was the cause of it? I don't know. And they're just on this psychological roller coaster, just a bundle of reactions, a puppet on a string. But if you can create a performance mindset, then you can start to figure out, okay, when I'm going good, when I'm performing at my best, these are the things that I'm doing. Let me replicate that. Let me train it. Let me build it. When I'm not performing well, I'm doing these cluster of things. Let me minimize and reduce it. Because really, it's all about consistency. If you want to be a great athlete, it's about performing day to day, day in, day out, week in, week out. Rain, shine, 10,000 fans, 60,000 fans. Like, you just go unfazed by, external things that are happening. And then you're able to manage the internal noise. Like, you dim it down, it doesn't impact you anymore. So you have like this direct line to your motor programs and your mental software, and everything's just clicking and humming. And damn, as you know, that's addictive. That's such a good feeling. Like, I want more of it. How do I do it?
Yeah, I love that.
So
And I love this idea of the performance mindset, and just kind of outside of putting that with athletes. That's something that we work with a lot of our clients is, okay, you may not have a Super Bowl next month, but you do have something that's super important in your life that you can treat like it is the Super Bowl.
mhm.
And then I don't know if you can answer this, but I think about Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, the guy who founded Flow. And then one of the things he said was that our ability to control our attention for when we want, where we want, how long we want, determines the quality of our life. Why do you feel? Okay, why do you feel that is?
I mean, it's basically like a Buddhist concept. Is like, or more. My mentor used to always say, tell me what you believe in and what you think or what you attend to, and I'll tell you who you are. Basically, like, we are what we think about most, we are what we attend to most. So if you're focusing, you're an athlete, let's say high, well, your population is, you said 30 to 40 year olds. If you're 35 years old and you're attending to the thought process of, I'm just not good, I suck, I'm old, I'm over the hill, I don't have what it takes, uh, like, how does that not impact you, your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings, your physiology, your energy system, and basically your behavior and your performance? It'd be basically like, if you had that mentality, you just had like 10 people around you constantly in your ears: you suck, you're terrible, you're no good. Like, how do you thrive in an environment that's dark? Well, the thing is, you don't. So you have to, well, if you want to, uplift your performance, upgrade your performance, like, one good way is just like, what am I attending to? What are my thoughts? What is it doing to my feeling state? And what are some things I could do to be able to, one, pay attention to, and then two, regulate it?
And could you talk a little bit more about performance mindset and why that's so important, and how we can all prepare for that, prepare to get into that?
Yeah, to me, the performance mindset is, everything. It's the way that you choose to approach, your sport or your performance. It we do a lot of training when it comes to, strength and conditioning, but we also need to take care of the mind as well. So the performance mindset to me is being able to perform at your best when it matters most. So being able to concentrate amidst distractions, being able to bounce back from failures, being able to be confident in any situation. Like, those are some essentials to have in order to perform at your best or to your full potential. And ways to develop that, there's a lot of different ways. I think one is, like, really figuring out your best performances, because there is a signature in there. There is information. Like, you are having good outcomes in production for a reason. Like, you're contributing to that, right? It's just not luck. You're driving and making that happen. So, it can be anything. It could be inside, the mental skills realm or space, or outside. Like, everything's important to the athlete. Your sleep and your recovery, your nutrition, your strength and conditioning program, your flexibility program, and then also your mental skills program. Like, how are those? How are you doing in each of those areas? Um, Trying to find some of the inherent weaknesses and figuring out, like, how to upgrade them, basically. So let's say that maybe you lack confidence, scale of 1 to 10, maybe that's a 5, and that's becomes a goal or an interest that you would like to make some strides and improvements. Then you kind of figure out, you can work with a sports psychology, mental skills coach, pick up a book, figure out ways to develop and build confidence, which there's a ton. You could use a thought log or thought diary where you're recording your thoughts, almost like a food diary, trying to figure out what you say to yourself, which a lot of times when you figure it out, you're like, damn, I'm the meanest person to myself. I treat everybody else with kindness, but man, I'm just kind of ugly. And then, once you figure that out, it's like, what are the triggers? How does that impact your emotional state and your feelings, like I suggested? And really learning how our core beliefs and the rules that we make, to live and through our day to day, and our thought process and our attitude and our perspective, like how does that impact the things that we do, the behaviors that we engage in, and then the performance outcomes that occur. And then going back to confidence, maybe it's like doing some reframing or some countering or some self-talk or some affirmations or some motivational videos or highlight. There's just an endless amount of things that you can do to make a positive impact on your confidence. And if you're confidence, confidence is king or queen. Like when you're playing with confidence, like look out, right? I mean, and the play becomes fun, the performance becomes fun, the sport becomes fun. You're out there, you're playing with a little swag, up on your toes. You're out there, maybe you're playing some baseball, and in your head, you're just like, man, this pitcher has no chance. I'm gonna squash him. It's a good feeling, but that emergent state has been proven and shown that leads to success. I think one, looking in the mirror, getting right, identifying your best performances, your worst performances. From there, what do you want to work on? And then relentlessly attacking and pursuing those things that you want to increase.
That's amazing. And then it seems like just when you're more confident, there's less hesitation when you do
Yeah.
things. And you brought up a concept that before we went live here that potentially has to do with this that I'd love you to elaborate on that I haven't heard before, this idea of being mode. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So there are a lot of similar concepts out there that are parallel to being mode and doing mode. So there's in the military, we used to talk a lot about training and trusting mindset. So I don't know if you've heard of that, or self one and self two, or chimp and professor brain.
Mm-hmm.
But being mode and doing mode come from Eastern tradition. And so basically, what it's saying is that you need both, and we need to figure out how to move the fulcrum to the center. Like sometimes you need to be in doing mode where you're, let's say, post game analysis, and you're using your prefrontal cortex to dissect the game and analyze it, or maybe you're stepping outside the box and figuring out what pitch might be thrown. Or how to play, how to shade the defense, to D them up. You're focused on goal setting, you're focused on outcome, those types of things. The problem is that we're conditioned in this society and driven into doing mode, and
Mm.
that really curbs our ability to have more flow-like states. We're conditioned to approach experiences right now with thought and seriousness and complexity and focusing on result. And so we have to figure out a way to counterbalance that conditioning. And there are some ways. Like when I think of being mode, I think of training restfulness and non-doing, and staying present, staying connected, and staying open and process oriented and silent and safe and sensing. Like all those things, the letting go, the surrendering, those things in a real experiential way lead to our best performances. Like if we're trying to muscle movements, if we're white knuckling the racket or the club or the bat, or we're using too much tension because we really want to try hard, you know, your muscles are going to lock up. You're not going to be fluid. You're not going to be smooth. You're going to be uncoordinated. And then, you really look at like the messaging that we received growing up, things like piss excellence. If you're not first, you're last. Tying's like kissing your sister. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps. We are bombarded with messages that tell us that hard work is where it's at, effort is where it's at. Focus harder, try harder, give 110%. But that's not the experience we have when we're in a state of flow. We're effortless. We're artistic, we're creative, we're rhythmic. It's not a lot of happening up in the mind, and research has proven that. Like, there's a quieting of the mind, the balancing of the brain. Things go silent up there. You're connected, like I said, to your motor programs. And it has a real they have real consequences. When I used to work a lot with special forces guys, if you are stressed out and taxed and under pressure and not dealing with it, then at about 115 beats per minute, your heart rate, you start to lose your fine motor movements, right? So your fine motor movements, you need that for precision shooting. You need that to manipulate your hands and your fingers, whatever you're doing. But without it, it's going to be really tough to put in a good performance. At 145, you lose your motor, complex motor skills. At 170, you have a whole cognitive catastrophe. So if you can't manage the pressure, if you can't manage the stress, then it has a mental, emotional, and physiological impact on your performance. Just like with cops, they say like your vision can collapse by 70%. Now you're looking at things through the straw and you can't see the enemy. You can't detect them, up in the tower, hiding in the bushes or anything like that. Things appear closer than they really are. So you start reacting a little bit faster. You get hypervigilance where your attention sticks. Once again, you get a lot of the tension, and you lose the fluidity. So by not mismanaging the mind, by being too much in doing mode, then you're going to mismanage your performance.
Yeah, when you talk about cops, I forgot which one of the books it was, Malcolm Gladwell, but when they're resting, not their resting heart rate, but once their heart rate reached a certain level, man, it just became very unpredictable in terms of what would happen in terms of interaction. And it led to a lot of shooting unarmed people and things like that, just because, like you said, their vision collapse and inability to think and things like that.
That if you're engaged in that deadly force encounter and you feel like someone's maybe it appears like they're 10 feet closer than they really are, almost like the side of your view mirror, then you might escalate your force and move from baton or taser to your piece, which can have some real dire consequences for you and the person that you're engaged with. So it's real interesting. It's fascinating the way, the mind and the body works. And it really it really comes down to like those coping skills, those performance skills that you use in high pressure situations. Like, we have to develop them and continue working on them and building them and strengthening them. And I try to really create a armory of different mental or coping skills, so that and when you feel like, man, I got all kinds of tactics for any situation. I'm like an e-tool, man, mental e-tool. Come at me life, like that creates confidence. Like, you feel prepared. So that's just going to create that positive vortex to a good performance.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I agree so 100%. Yeah. So when my elder son entered middle school, he's in 8th grade now. That was like the thing. I was like, number one skill you got to cultivate while you're here, being able to stay cool under pressure, right? Because it's dealing with peer pressure from other boys, and then dealing with girls, and then teachers, and then parent that doesn't know exactly what you're going through throughout your day. But then that's kind of expanded for me, and it's like, it really is might be the most important skill overall, because just in terms of being able to fluidly function and keep moving forward. This idea of stepping back, most high performers, whether sports, military, business, other, creative industries, that sense of urgency, many believe that's what helped get them there. So let's say they're struggling now. What would your kind of process be in terms of being able to step back, become more in being mode, and providing them with particular tools or things that they could do so they could kind of trust that process, which potentially will lead to a better result?
Yeah, absolutely. I think once again, like really taking an honest look at yourself and identifying kind of the areas where you where it's just not as smooth or fluid or not going the way you want. And we all have areas, right? And that might lead to like training different different skills. So let's say one is like you are an A-type personality. You're go 100%, just burning through life. One is a self-awareness piece, and the messages. Like I would start sometimes with the messages and the perspective. Like most A-type of person, I'm hardwired that way. That's just the way I am. I can't help it. Well, how are you going to find any solution if you already say that there's nothing you can do? There are some things to do, right? So yeah, I'm A-type personality. It helps me in the situations like I'm persistent, I'm relentless. I don't take no for an answer, which is good for this particular field, but I burn out easily. I don't rest and recover, and I know that's important. I rub people maybe the wrong way. I just want to take the edge off of that a little bit. What are some things I can do? Once again, like maybe, taking a look at the thoughts that you have and how they're serving you or enslaving you. Maybe taking a look at like your core beliefs and softening them or changing them a little bit. Maybe it is creating more chances to just get grounded, taking a couple deep breaths, or doing a little bit of mindfulness or meditation, or connecting to nature. Like you have to customize your own performance pathway and plan if you're interested in attaining the things that you deem are important. And that can be tangible things, material things, or it could be attitudinal. Like I want to learn how to just be more forgiving. Like there's a curriculum for those things. And I think a good first step is pick up the books, go to some reflection, engage in some meditation, try out a mental performance coach and see how it goes. I guarantee there's so much that people in my field can do and offer. Really, we can help people make the changes that they want to make. And the other thing is good, as about, is like when you have a battle buddy, or when you're forced to work with somebody, like you usually do the work, rather than finding excuses. So there's that accountability piece as well. So that's just one.
Yeah. And then in the time that I've known you and that we've been friends, the Eastern you've always mixed Western philosophy and Eastern philosophy. How did you get into that?
Yeah. It's just always been a big part of what I do. I was a couple, like I was on another podcast, and they're asking me, about my like theoretical background and how I got into, Asian psychotherapy and Eastern philosophy. And I've just always had an interest, even when I was young. Like, funny things is like growing up. I mean, I don't know how old you are, Chase, but growing up, there used to be kung fu theater like every Sunday when there was like 3 channels, in the 80s, and it was like a 1 o'clock, on Sundays, and I just there religiously, like there's just something about the East, the mindset and the attitude and the practices, and that just just spoke to me. And then even in high school, I did a lot of reading in Buddhism and Taoism and Hinduism. And I was anyway, back to the podcast, they had asked me like kind of, how did I get into it? And the thing I shared was I remembered at that moment, like I wrote a paper when I went to Skyline High School in Oakland. The teacher said, write a paper on who you want to become, when you're an adult. I kind of like tongue in cheek, but not really. I said I want to be a Buddhist skateboarder, just thrasher, and so I was just kind of made me chuckle that I realized like, it's just always been into Eastern practices and I've had a meditation practice forever. Starting out in high school, I utilized mindfulness as an athlete, and it really helped me perform. I taught it as a coach. I taught it as a student, getting their doctorate degree. I've created programs, combining it with biofeedback. Performance, for me, it just lends itself to the theoretical component, like how do you choose to see the world, the psychology of it and the health of it, and then also like what are the main practices that could help in a performance situation or just life situation. So the couple of things I really look at are I look at like 7 capacities or higher capacities, so one is like building awareness, really focusing on increasing attention. I'm looking at ethicality, redirecting motivation, really helping out when it comes to managing your emotions, and then helping people make like wiser decisions. And it really comes after like, for me, Western psychology there was something missing for me. Like when you look at psychology developmentally in the West, they look at kind of 3 phases. There's like this there's this what do they call it now? Like transpersonal, pre-transpersonal, transpersonal, and like post-transpersonal. And the focus, for the first 2 is really on the past. Like if you do psychotherapy, they're focusing on, growing up and, all these experiences that you had and how those impact the present moment. Where the East has really looked at, post-conventional methods, like how do I help people become more focused in the present moment, and how do I train these things to develop happiness, well-being, and these remarkable psychological capacities through like meditation and other things. So when I think of like the curriculum for performance, it's really those things that I mentioned, those 7 things, and that kind of is like the thing that guides me in helping people train those things, because we can achieve things. We can be better than we are today. We could work on our fear and anger and turn them into love and curiosity. Like those are trainable things. So helping people with their metamotives, called metamotives, like their self-actualization and transcending and selfless service. So that's kind of like the orientation that I operate from. And then last little piece, sorry to be so long-winded, is like in the West, we use a lot of like control. We try to control everything, control thinking, control our emotional states. And a lot of times when you're trying to control something, like you're creating friction. Friction has energy. And there's this concept called like ironic processing, where the more you try to control something, then, like you're controlling, don't think of the pink elephant, and then you have a process that goes like this. And you say, don't think of the pink elephant. You're trying, and all of a sudden it comes crashing down, and now you see nothing but pink elephants. Why try to control thinking? Why not look at thinking as that's just like what the mind does? The body pushes blood through the system. The mind pushes thoughts through the system. Why get hooked? Why believe what we're thinking? And then you're just letting it go. Then it doesn't send you down this rabbit hole of, minutes, hours, days, getting in a mood, even training your trait to be in these, states and situations where you're just you're not feeling good. So that's kind of the reason in the background of why I take an Eastern slant.
That's amazing. And then could you really quickly rattle off those 7 components one more time?
Yeah, so I'm really
Awareness.
looking to develop attention, to like a laser like, and it's been shown that we really can do those. And these are like called higher capacities. I'm really helping people in the emotional domain. So, reducing anger and fear. A lot of athletes, they use anger and they use fear, and that's okay, but it can burn you out too. And it could,
It's different energy for sure.
you can really, like, you can use it, to get motivated, increase your energy, but up to a certain point. And after that certain point, then then your performance really starts to deteriorate. It's like Greek fire. You got to be really careful with how you deal with it. I'm really looking at like cognitive development. So helping people like move beyond linear logic to like vision logic or network logic, like making these interconnections between groups of ideas. So the example there is like, football is highly complex nowadays. Like, you need a PhD to play professional football. Like, you got these playbooks. How do we get people to see patterns, recognize patterns, connect ideas, use more of your imagery and your vision logic and your networking logic. Really helping with the ceaseless agitation that people experience, and creating more profound peace and equanimity and balance. Gaining wisdom, looking at ethicality, like, what's your purpose? What's your why? What do you believe in? What are your core beliefs? What are your rules on life? What do you value? Like, that's an important component. That's probably, in religion and spirituality, that's like number one. But I think performance, I've kind of switched them around. I like train attention, and then I train awareness, and then I train emotion. And then from there, I move into like, or cognitive domain, and then emotion. And then I move into, I feel like, with wisdom and or ethicality, then wisdom. I think that's 6 or 7. I don't know if I
Yeah,
have
it is.
in, but
Attention, awareness, emotional control, cognitive development, more profound peace and balance. You said ethics and then
yeah,
wisdom.
ethics, yeah. And it's not morality; it's more of like, how do you look at the world, what matters to you. So if you're doing something like, you ever heard of the VIA, the values in action, that comes out of positive psychology and University of Pennsylvania? They've been doing it for like 20 years. We use it in the military, in the more in the counseling side of like the MRT, the mental resilience training program. And it's great. And I think it's like a 100-item questionnaire. You can
Mm,
go and use it free. It's on AuthenticHappiness.com. They've done like, 10 to 15 years of research from all these different countries and languages. And so they have, a vault of information on it, which helps with the science and the research and the truth and of it. And it basically, you take it and it gives you a printout of your your 24 values in action.
mm.
So you can take a look at your top 5, and it's pretty cool to see how, so you're like, oh damn, they got me, that, like, that's me. um so there's things like perseverance and leadership and spirituality and honesty and integrity. And so you can take a look at that and start working on those things, like, for instance, maybe you value honesty, but you're not bringing it into your everyday. So you can
Yeah.
figure out, well, how can I be more honest with myself? Because I'm lying to myself, and that's just not helping. And then how do I be more honest in certain situations, because I value it, but I just kind of lost it for a while. Let me do some things to be able to make sure I'm training that.
Yeah, I think that's so good. And I think it's been so relevant to the flourishing personality profile has been very relevant to themes that we've been talking about here, because in terms of awareness and knowing what works for you when you're at your best. So knowing what your top three, your top five traits are, and
Mhm.
then, really embracing those and spending more time in those, I think is for most of us is probably going to lead to more time in that in my zone state.
Yeah, I think we use in the performance world, like nicely said, we use something called the performance profile,
Mm,
uh, and it's basically it looks like a pizza pie or a spider web, and so on the outside you have like 10 or 12 characteristics or factors, and you ask the athlete when you're performing at your best, like what's happening for you. Now, I do it a little bit different. Like a lot of times, sports psychologists or mental performance coach will just have you do your mental domain, but that's just one slice of the pie when you're a total athlete. So I have them try to identify some mental skills, some strategic skills, some technical skills, and then some values. And I developed this kind of when I was working with the Seattle Mariners. I called it the MAPS. And then there's a scale like 1 through 10 that starts off like the little concentric circle and then moves outward to the larger, to the outside circles.
hmm
And you shade in like how much you possess. So, if you're an athlete and you have, like you said, marathon runners and triathletes, like what would be something that they would say that would lead to exceptional performance? Like that they would need to have to be able to just be smashing it.
I'm prepared for this, or I think maybe I'm thinking about with what we've talked about today, maybe less is more in terms of how many hours they put in terms of training. Those are two
Yeah.
things that really come to mind.
So that's good. So then less is more. Like we have to try. Like what I would do is try to find a label for that. Like what does that mean? Maybe it's restfulness. Maybe it's creating stillness or creating space, whatever, right? And then so they put that on the outside, and then you shade in like how much do you possess now? And if they possess like an 8, then we're good. Usually like 7, 8, 9, I don't really touch it. If it's 5 or 6, then I might focus on that. If it's 0 to like 4, like red alarm, we need to really practice those things. So if it's something, let's say like time management, or they lack resilience or grit, then we try to fit. Okay, let's focus on that. What will we be doing if we went from a 3 to just a 5? Like what can we add and what can we delete? And so they're actively working on building their grit and building their ability to bounce back or be persistent, and persevere. And then by practicing those things over and over on a daily basis, naturally you get better, right? What you repeat, you get
And
better.
then how do you get that initial score? That's based off
You just
profile.
based on subjective,
Okay,
that's
yeah,
it's funny because there's like a lot more research on it now, but in the beginning it was like a lot of people say, oh, there's no research on it. But everybody loves using it, the practitioners and the athletes, and it's subjective. That's what I love about it. Like yourself,
yeah.
if you're confident or not. And it's a great way that leads into like conversations with athletes and tactile athletes, or just yourself. Like if you filled it out and you said, like in your work, I need to work on my presentation skills. That's really low. Now it helps you focus. Now it helps you to start maybe doing some research, and you start to create a plan of action around that. And there's certain things you could do to be a presenter, right? You could practice presenting. You could, go to a workshop. You can do some reading. There, I mean, just it's endless. And if you're doing those things, you're getting better.
hmm I love that. Okay, so we talked about being mode. We talked about attention control. We got a couple minutes left here. I'd love to hear your thoughts on gratitude and specifically how people can get all the benefits from it, in your opinion. Is it writing it down? Is it really taking time to reflect and like really feel into it? Is it just saying it? What are your thoughts on gratitude and how can people really get the benefits of that?
Yeah, I think for that, let me back it up just a little bit, if that's okay. Remember, I was telling you, like my approach is really looking at what are some of the problems and issues that today's athletes, really deal with.
Mm.
Um, and one of it is like we live in an impulsive society where people like really need instant gratification, where people aren't grateful for the things that they have. They want more of what they don't have, and they're not happy with what they have. Um, so what does that create? That creates like a real bitter society, a sarcastic society, a society that just is not very appreciative. And so this is why I think gratitude is an essential skill for today, because it really can combat that. It's an antidote
Mm.
to
I love that.
taking things for granted. Um, so there's a lot of things that you can do. Within Buddhism, they teach a lot about gratitude or just positive psychology. In that UPenn I was talking, University of Pennsylvania,
Mm. Yeah.
master's degree in positive psychology, and there's a couple books like Learned Optimism and Flourish, and Marty Seligman had come out with that. He was like the father of positive psychology, and he teaches a skill where you just write down 3 things that you're grateful for every day. you know I did that when I was in the MRT program because it was something I didn't do. I just did like the core sports psychology performance skills. Like, oh, you know what, let me try this. And I try everything. I use myself as a guinea pig, and it really did. Like, I used it with my daughter when she was like 4, 5, 6 years old, and around the dinner table with her, it was just the two of us. And it would start out with like, Dad, I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for the house we live in. I'm grateful for the food. I'm grateful for, because I worked for the military. I'm grateful the soldiers fighting, for us to in our freedom and all that. And then over time, it started to get a little bit more nuanced. Like,
Mm.
it oriented her brain where she was like hunting for the good stuff, looking for it. Like,
I
we
love that.
around the dinner table, and she'd say, Dad, you know what? I dropped my pen and someone picked it up for me. That was really kind of them. Or, you know, um, I got to walk to school, and it was a nice breeze, or, oh, you and I got to go, on a hike, and it just really made me feel good. And so you really start looking at the small things. And as a result, like, how can you not be happier? You
Mm.
know, Creating a gratitude journal, writing down 3 things, practicing reframing, connecting to your senses, um, practicing loving kindness meditation. So there's a lot of active, engaging things that you can do to build gratitude. And I would say, like, in my own practice, which I've been doing this for decades, there has been moments in my life where, like, for 3 year period, 3 month, I wish 3 year periods, 3 month periods, where um, I'm just feeling like it's almost I don't even want to share it because might sound kind of strange, but like I wake up with a tremendous amount of joy, and
Mm.
every breath I'm happy as you can be, and I go to bed that way. And gratitude is a piece of that. It really helps ground me, and so I practice gratitude every day, and I think that with a couple other things can create this state and space where you feel equanimous, you feel balanced, like you're not sweating the small stuff, like your body's just humming, you're feeling good, you're feeling flexy, you're handling situations a lot more maturely. Your pressure, what pressure? That stuff people put in tires, right? Like, you're just
Ah.
operating on that higher capacity. But then what happens is you stop practicing a little bit. Too much is on your plate. You're not practicing rest and recovery and stillness. And then all of a sudden the shit comes crashing down, and the misery starts to come in again. So you got to stay on top of these skills. One thing you could do is practice gratitude. And I can guarantee you that it's going to help you love life and see miracles. Like I started out, miracles are everywhere. Like, man, we're on a spinning planet, moving through space, with other human beings that we're so connected and close to, that we wouldn't be any other time. Like, that's just insane. Like, I get to spend time with my son and my daughter and people I love, we're in the right planet, the right area. We have the right relationships at the right time. It's kind of mind blowing. How can you not be grateful for those things?
That's amazing. Well, I'm grateful for you, Mike. I think this was absolutely extraordinary. There's so much here. I got pages of notes. And I'm really excited to potentially collaborate with you moving forward. And your amount of knowledge in terms of how you can help is just absolutely extraordinary. I know that you've been big, you're deep in academia, but if people wanted to reach out to you, what is the best way to do that now?
Yes, through until I get my consulting business back up and running, because I'm just doing so much educational academic stuff. Is just mgerson at nu.edu. So Mike Gerson basically at nationaluniversity.com. Gerson at nu.edu.
Got it. Well, thank you for coming on Super Athlete Radio, Mike. You killed it.
Yeah, man. Thank you, Chase. And, just for people listening out there, man, you're really in good hands. Chase and I met about 6 years ago. I knew him when he had long hair, and he was starting out doing podcasting. We're in my lab downstairs in my bat cave. And, I met Chase at a coffee shop, and he gave me a book. He bought me a cup of coffee. I'm like, who does that? That's just incredibly kind. So if you're working with Chase, you're in good hands, a lot of knowledge. There's no harder worker, and he's going to help you, get better at whatever you want to set out to do.
God bless you, Mike. You're the best.
Take care, Chase.